It was one of those really stormy days. I drove to work. It was raining. You can see the clouds were dark grey. And our first job of the day was to go and search for a what people believe was a young kid that got washed off a bridge after flooding. So there was that much rain the previous 3 days. All the local creeks and everywhere was flooded. So we spent our first maybe hour of the shift around Altona and Werribee searching for this kid that had supposedly washed off a bridge. And then we got called to a guy, a lone sailor who was sailing around the world in his yacht who got caught in the storm in Bass Strait. The problem was, I remember reading the paper seeing that the Spirit of Tasmania, which is a big cargo and transport ship that does the
Mm.
passengers to and from Tassie and Melbourne, had turned back because the holes on the upper deck had got smashed.
Wow.
So I thought, this guy's out in his middle of his yacht, and it can't be too big a yacht. And I remember looking over to to Bass Strait, and there's this massive dark grey cloud just sitting over the top of the peninsula, which was just on the horizon. And I thought, well, that's just crap. So there's three of us on board. There's a police pilot and two observers. I was one of them. One of us has to operate a winch, and one of us has to volunteer to go down the wire. Believe it or not, it was my wetsuit that was the right size to fit me that was in the pack. So it was my turn to go down the wire. Went back for a briefing and then filled up and headed out to the point 65 miles off Sale, which is on the coast.
Hmm.
So that's about 65 miles. That's past, I believe, most of the offshore platforms in Bass Strait. We fueled up, headed out there, and I remember crossing the coast thinking that, the ocean had this murky greenish water to it. So it was the sand had been washed off and was spilling out. So it had this milky colour to it, and there was white caps and those wind vanes. As the white caps they blow across the water and make these big streaks. The plan was to get the guy off the yacht as soon as possible. We had to sink his yacht. His yacht was dismasted. His engine was broken. He had no way of getting around. He was already rolled a couple of times and smashed his arm, and he wanted out. He was an ex-sea captain on super tankers, retired, built his own yacht, sailed around the world, and got caught in a storm.
Yeah.
Now he had to sink by pulling the seacocks in the back, and he had to sink it because he couldn't leave it floundering in the shipping lane. Otherwise, someone had hit it. We've basically given him the message to sink it the second he sees the helicopter, but he never got it
Hmm.
for whatever reason. So we eventually found him, but the problem was finding him was we almost ran out of fuel because he's in a 30-foot yacht and the white caps on top of the waves are the same height and length as the yacht. So I was just like looking at 100 different yachts out there, having
Hmm.
a look and realising, no, it's a bit of sea foam or it's a bit of a top. So the pilot actually found it. And believe it or not, he was so close to it, he nearly hit it when he found it because it was, we thought, why didn't we see that before? And then we realised that, it's the same size of white cap. So he was standing on the deck waiting for us. I'd already had my harness on and I had a rescue strap, which is like a big horse collar. You put around the patient under their arms and they hold their hands in the front. You hoist them out. So I got winched to the door. They opened the door, got me out and started winching me onto the deck of the yacht. And I'd actually said to the winch operator just before, try and get me on the deck. If we can't get on the deck, I'll go in the water next to the boat and call him in. I don't know how the winch operator did it, but he got me, it landed me within arm's reach of this elderly sailor. He's about 70 years old, this bloke. And I landed so close to him, I actually touched him and said, "You come with me." And he said something to me. I couldn't hear a word. Not only got earmuffs on it, but you got the roar of the wind and the waves, and you got this helicopter hovering above you. And he turned around and disappeared back into the cabin. And I thought, I got no idea what's happening. So I turned to the helicopter to say, I don't know. And I could see the cable because when they winch you down onto the deck, they pay out a lot of cable beside you, just in a big coil. So if something happens and you move off station, I'm not
Hmm.
going to take you off the deck. But it had coiled around, then it had gone over the back of the yacht and I saw it coming around this way, and I looked and I saw the helicopter moving over the top of me. So something happened that the pilot had lost reference. Because you got to imagine the pilot can't really see the yacht because it's actually behind him underneath the helicopter. So he's got to rely on signals from the winch operator. So they'd lost station. He was moving forward and I was pitching up and down, and I could see that the cable was getting tighter, and I flicked it off and flicked it over towards the helicopter, where the helicopter was. And that was it. It went tight, and I've just gone catapulted. Just enough time just to step or try and step over the rail of the yacht, the stainless steel rail. I'd obviously hit it because I had bruises all over my knee afterwards, but I actually slammed into the side of a wave. I saw it coming and tried to protect myself by putting my arm across my chest. But I'd hit it and obviously compressed my chest, and all the air went out of my lungs, and I ended up underwater. I don't know how deep, but you imagine all that extra cable, which weighs maybe 10, 20 kilos, was now in the water. And that shit don't float. So I wasn't coming to the surface, and I thought, well, if I take a breath now, that's going to be it. And everything in your brain says you need to take a breath, and the other part of your brain says if you take a breath, it's going to be full of seawater, and that's when panic set in, because you think, I cannot do one thing to help myself out because I don't know which way is up and I've got no air. And it felt like an actual lifetime that I was under the water, but I reckon, to be honest, only probably a couple of seconds, maybe 10, 12 seconds at the most, because I know the winch operator would have seen me disappear off the yacht, move the helicopter and start winching in cable, like pulling in a fish. And he eventually did, and I got out of the water, and that's when the panic just went.
Yeah.
Thank God for that. And then I knew the next plan was to put me in the water. Not that I really wanted to give another crack, but we did. Turns out the sailor, by the time I got in the water, he was back out of the cabin. He never got the message to pull the seacock valves and sink his boat, so he had actually turned around to do that.
Yeah, okay.
So, if that message got delivered, would have been the difference between a very clean, successful winch rescue and a really terrible one. The only thing that got me past that panic was that I sort of, in the back of my mind, I knew what the winch operator was going to do, because I was a winch operator myself. So I knew that they were going to try and get me out of water. I just had to hang on long enough. And it's amazing, the second I was out of the water, that panic went. I knew exactly what the plan was, so we went back to it. But then again, later on, when the adrenaline comes down, your shoulders and your chest and your ribs are all graze, your knees grey, you start to feel that, because you never even knew that happened. I remember sitting in the shower and going, that's painful. And then you come down off that high, and then you think, shit, I'll do that again. And I didn't. So I left not long after that. I actually went to the federal police after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, things can get out of control. But it's nice to know, and I think we all want to believe that in those situations we can do the right thing and still act. It's like the fight, flight response. It's nice to know that you're not going to faint, black out, or run. Not that you could run. Or faint. But things can change. But it is nice to know that you get through that stuff.